Welcome everyone to the Tom Colohue channels, where today we have a bit of a special. It is a Tuesday, it's a bit of a weird one, it is not our typical spoiler warning, but there is still plenty to talk about. Joining myself, Tom Colohue, is my colleague Gleb Korotki. He has been here before, of course, diving into the financials of AEW. I've referred to him before as my hashtag proper journalist friend, and he will continue to be so. Gleb, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to be here. And hello, everyone, as well. Everyone is watching, as we're about to dive out into something very, very interesting, isn't it?
I certainly think something very, very interesting. It's a crazy world that's been launched into. Wrestling's always a bit mad, but it's gotten a bit more crazy due to, that one little punk that you can't quite get rid of. We have a few people jumping into the chat. Barry, Spider-Boss and Jaden already saying hi. We have a question from Ed. This will be slightly different to the spoiler warning streams. I'm not going to be trying to keep up with the chat in full. I appreciate that you're here, Ed, as well, to sort of monitor things as they go if you can. And we will mostly be going through our own analysis of what's going on. By all means, jump in and chat away. We will be picking out what questions we can. I can see Spider-Boss asking one just for you there, Gleb. We will get to those. But in the meantime, let's start by talking about what's been going on. Now, we put together a bit of a script on this just to make sure we're in the exact right spot. I have some questions that I'm going to be asking. Firstly, though, Gleb, I'd like you to take the wheel and talk about your understanding of what happened with CM Punk in AEW recently.
Well,
the big question.
You do like to just look at me and go, riddle me this, aren't you?
That is what I do, yes.
But fairly speaking, I think that the situation looks, I don't want to say straightforward because it isn't straightforward, but it is somewhat of a thing that keeps the traditions of whenever CM Punk is involved in something that is not particularly working well. Right, and we do know for a bit of time that AEW wasn't really working particularly well, especially with some disturbing news about Tony Khan, about the Elites being, if I recall correctly, there was a news a few months ago that they weren't happy with Tony Khan as well.
There was news around that, particularly as regards Cody Rhodes.
Yes, right. So it already felt like it's not clicking entirely as we would think it is. And then there's also CM Punk, who is most famously known outside of the fact that he's a brilliant worker, amazing on the mic, the best in the world, as he keeps calling himself. But we also do know that he's a bit of a problematic worker when it comes to if things are not clicking the way he would like them to click. And this is sort of a same scenario, with the only problem that this is not WWE anymore, right? In WWE, if you go out and make a pipe bomb like this is the only way how you can potentially try to change some things. And he got really lucky that somebody talked out Vince McMahon out of just firing him straight away. Although I don't really know if there was somebody involved in there back in the time.
Infamously, Vince McMahon has actually stayed on CM Punk's side. Triple H has been the problem.
Well, but what turned into is this famous Money in the Bank angle, right? But it still was one way or the other going through the very strict rules of the WWE.
Yes.
Yes, it was already somewhat broken, but not that hard. In AEW, you have much more freedom in expressing yourself, in doing stuff, in influencing stuff that is being done. And apparently what else you can do is sit on a press conference with your chairman and literally scream out things that you think are not exactly working the best in the company. And I think it's a little bit of like AEW own doing, really, because they created this company on the premise of we are a we are a democratic company. And I don't know what happens.
I love that you start mentioning free speech, which historically has ended brilliantly for everyone involved. If you're the person who stands there saying free speech, you tend to be the person who should probably shut up soon. That's always the vibe that I've got from people. People proclaiming themselves a free speech location. It's like the Truth Social of Donald Trump, created purely because he was such a problematic person they had to get rid. And to be clear, I'm not comparing CM Punk to Donald Trump. I just happened to mention them both in the exact same sentence. We have quite a few people jumping in with questions. We will be getting to them. Thank you so much for the questions that we have. Please remember to hit like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. I want to just read this out from Dana Greer saying, love Intercontinental Adventure, made me subscribe to your YouTube channel. Intercontinental Adventure, for those who don't know, is now a free podcast on PW Torch instead of just VIP. So I want to jump into the questions that we have for you, Gleb. There's quite a few, and I want to start with CM Punk. We spoke about the surprise that Tony Khan seems to have that this has actually happened. But at the same time, you signed CM Punk, surely you know what you're going to get. This all broke down at a press conference, and I always love the comparison. The WWE press conference was so well controlled. You had journalists being part of the show there, whereas this AEW press conference was wild. CM Punk, of course, put on a very, very strong speech regarding problems with Hangman Page, problems with the Elite, leaking information about him, and plenty more. Now, you're a journalist. This dominated the press conference where MJF was supposed to be the main story. MJF returned. It was supposed to be a triumph. A triumph for Tony Khan that the one-two-way star had been brought back. This was not the case. Have you ever seen a press conference like this?
Honestly, it's hard for me to remember anything like that because it feels as I don't want to spit names or spit phrases or anything like it's unprofessional or something that he's done is absolutely dishonorable or anything like that. I don't really want to go into those terms because they don't really mean anything, but did that create a scandalistic fuss around it? Yes, absolutely it did. And to just think about something like that, you only probably saw something like that in the shows, really, right? Like in TV shows. The only thing I can remember that sort of gives me the comparison is, for those of you who haven't seen, a little bit of spoiler alert, I guess. It's spoiler warning, you see. It is a spoiler warning.
It's a great name. It's a great name.
It is. Was in the, I think it was third season of The Boys. Or it's
big spoiler warning there. Big spoiler warning. We're being serious.
It is very big one. The one that this senator, I can't remember her name, senator puts the blame on the Giancarlo Esposito's character, and they shut him in prison. That is this, or even the Congress itself, the Congress scene with heads apparently. Don't lose your head,
let's leave it. Yes, that's perfect. Yes.
Yeah. So I think that this sort of press conference is the same thing that you would have seen in a TV show, but not in the real life, just because you know how many things are at stakes.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting moment about the entire thing, right? Apparently, there's nothing really too much at stake for neither of the people involved, because a lot of people have been suspended from the work. Yes, that is definitely true. There's an internal investigation. And most of those people, I think the Elite, the Jacksons brothers, Kenny Omega, CM Punk, and maybe Steel, but I'm not sure, have been removed from the promo video, right? For the AEW weekly shows. But for now, that's pretty much it. And to just think for a second that Han is going to go, yeah, I call myself out, I made a mistake, I am firing CM Punk. That's a good joke, but that's about it. In my eyes, at the very least, given the current situation.
I really find it telling, and we'll get to this a bit more later. I find it telling that Tony Khan did not actually announce any suspensions or firings. Sports Illustrated did. But we have a few questions coming through. I want to start with one from our colleague Ed Fry, someone we both know a little bit. We have a question saying, do you think the money spent on CM Punk, we did do a financial analysis, so we are a bit more aware of that, was gained back in any measurable way through attendance or merch? Do you think he's been worth the investment, essentially?
I don't know the money behind it. I'm not going to be able to tell that as an economist in any shape or form. I'm merely a journalist who can try to look at the figures and pretend that I understand what I talk about. But fairly speaking, I think ratings-wise, popularity-wise, yes, definitely, absolutely. Because before that moment, everything that had CM Punk involved in the AEW has been an absolute blast. Every single match, every single program, every single feud, every single anything, right? So speaking from this relative term, like I'm buying a performer, will that performer grant me the needed attention that I want from my demographic group, from my viewers, from everyone involved, and from wrestling fans as well, since we haven't seen Punk wrestling for a really, really long time.
True.
Right? So from that point of view, definitely so. Now, in money-wise, we don't really know because it's hard to say. In merch, I'm willing to make a bet that they made quite a good revenue out of that. But now, reputation-wise, it's a question, because now everybody's just looking at them and going, first time, mate. That type of thing. No, I mean genuinely, we've seen that already happen in the WWE. We shouldn't be really surprised that it happened again.
Well, I hope that answers your question as well, Spider Boss, about rating CM Punk's run. I completely agree. By the way, he has certainly been fantastic so far, but there's a reason I've always been calling him a flight risk. This seems like an inevitability that we would get there. I want to say hello to Kervin, Stuart, Richard, Traffic, quite a few more people jumping into the chat now. We have 46 viewers and counting. So as we continue, let me just get back to this. Now, what you've put here, and I completely agree, a lot of people were coming into even just spoiler warnings, saying that this was a work. This is not a work, I can say that categorically. Now, Dave Meltzer suggested that Punk had been speaking about his intentions in this press conference for weeks, and Punk, even in the press conference, was not actively responding to what would have been the first question from Nick Hausman, formerly of Wrestling Inc. I've got to be honest, I'm not fully aware of which company he is representing in this media scrum. Now, who attacked whom varies depending on the side of the conflict, and also the reporter in question. And you know me, quite often I'll analyse the work of different reporters here. There are suggestions that Mike Johnson of PW Insider, for example, has been openly supportive of CM Punk. For example, David Bixenspan mentioning that one. Meanwhile, an AEW wrestler has openly stated previously that AEW wrestlers are instructed to engage with Fightful's Sean Ross Sapp. So it's not a surprise that we're seeing a lot of reports about this from different sides and different periods as well. Punk and Steele were expected to be fired by various sources, but neither of them has been as of yet. Kenny Omega and both Young Bucks have been suspended. Meanwhile, CM Punk is injured and expected to be out for roughly 8 months, has already undergone the surgery. This is per Dave Meltzer. This may be why Tony Khan has not made an announcement, because he haven't heard anything about suspension, nothing about firing. Officially, there has been nothing done to CM Punk as of yet. A Steele, also no report, but A Steele is not a full-time AEW wrestler. Could potentially just have any future bookings cancelled. So, Tony Khan found himself in an interesting position. We're going to be covering Tony Khan in quite some depth here. Sitting next to CM Punk, as CM Punk said a number of things potentially damaging to his company and the elite upon which it was founded. Elite is literally the middle word in his company. Different thing. In that scenario, is there also blame on Tony Khan for not stepping in?
I mean, it's a yes or no. It's a very intricate. I think that we're stepping on a very intricate ground here, because as itself, the scandal itself is sort of repetitive, sort of stereotypical. We've seen that already happen years ago, not just in WWE, but in insert the company name here, right? Because there's somebody who's not exactly happy with the work of executives, and that somebody most likely is somewhat of a superstar in the thing that he's doing, probably one of the most talented people as well, and he's complaining because he knows he can complain just because of the fact of who he is.
Yeah.
We've seen that story a million of times. Now, what we haven't really seen is the story of Tony Khan himself, because more and more I see little, things that he's doing or things that is being said about him, more and more I have a feeling that this man is literally just bought himself a toy, fairly speaking. Because I think it was even called out, I don't remember by whom exactly, so I'm not going to state a source here, but after Vince McMahon has stepped down from his role, Tony Khan has made this tweet about that he's now the longest running CEO in wrestling, which is essentially just gloating.
It is. It's appealing to the base in many ways. There's an element of humour to it if you're not really invested in either side. A lot of people are invested in either side.
Yeah, but to be fair, it's quite a bit disrespectful, isn't it? Like, at the very least, I do understand that there's a scandal going on around, and if Vince McMahon will be found guilty, then he should be punished for his actions, which is definitely not something that we approve. I think I can speak for both of us.
You absolutely can. That investigation is still ongoing.
But yet, make fun of a person that literally made sure that this business stays and thrives for the many years that it stayed and thrived after the fall of NWA and WCW and other companies leaving WWE there. Basically make sure that AEW just exists in the first place. Right? It feels a bit strange. And now when you look into things that Tony Khan is doing, it starts to become stranger and stranger. Focus on me. Thank you. It starts to be stranger and stranger furthermore, right? We've seen reports that Tony Khan is an extremely moody person. He just does something because he feels like he wants to do it, and he goes, well, we can do it, so why not do it, right? There are people who are reporting that they have communications issues with that man.
Yeah.
They can't get to him. They can't talk to him. And in the same moment, we hear that he's listening, right? That he listens to the people that he speaks to, and he's willing to listen to the critique as well. Even openly said that he respects Jim. I think it's Jim Cornette, right? Who is literally just pounding the company down to the ground.
Yeah, very much so.
So it's a very strange psychological portrait, don't you think? It is really strange.
It is always interesting to me, speaking from a psychological perspective, to be clear, this is not an area that I specialise in, this is just my personal interest. When people are sort of taking in too much, and by that I mean that everything for a person is input, everything you experience is input, and you take that in, you develop your personality and your character based on the things that you bring in, and thus what comes out is you as a person. I always find it interesting when someone is listening to too many voices or listening to every voice. You can't give credence to everyone. You can't respect the views of everyone. You have to choose who is valuable to you, who is worth listening to, and they should have an impact on you. Whereas, for example, in the interview with Pat McAfee, Vince McMahon said, we don't listen to the internet. I respected that. Because ultimately, I've seen people on the internet. They're not really worth listening to most of the time. And I say this fully in the knowledge that I'm on the internet right now. I'm on the internet right now. And I say that full in the knowledge.
Well, frankly speaking, a lot of times we see people willing to make a statement just for the sake of making a statement. Right? Not willing to even have some kind of talk about things that are going on.
Yeah.
And it feels to me that is probably Vince McMahon making a bit of a mistake. Maybe he does. Maybe he should, for example, or she should have. It's a bit hard to speak in that relative term as he's no longer running WWE, but you know what I mean? Maybe he should have created a department, for example, that would be scrapping and sort of analyzing this data and then bringing it into Vince in a small package and going, okay, statement-wise, they think this, this, and this. Are you willing to do anything about it? Just to, you know, get the picture of how things are looking, how things are going. There are ways how you can work with it. When with Han, I look at it and I think, okay, it feels like he's just literally letting it loose, how it's going to play out. Then he steps in and maybe does something good. Maybe doesn't. That is a question. That's why this entire situation is actually so much interesting, because I think that we shouldn't evaluate things that he did or didn't do just of yet. I think that we should evaluate it as this thing progresses, right? Because right now they found themselves is in an incredible hard situation. WWE are skyrocketing up thanks to the fact that now they have been, Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. So things already looking absolutely different. While AEW receiving a crisis moment with people inside of the locker room stepping up and going, okay, guys, yeah, things are looking. Bring down the swear words. Things are looking, all right?
Things are
They
looking,
don't.
yeah.
Yeah, things are looking. So we shouldn't really let it cling to us. We should just go out and make sure that the show is just being delivered, right? And I think that there are 3 people who already did this to the entire locker room, which is Chris Jericho. Hard to be surprised about, since
True.
I don't even know how many years now he's spent in that business. Way too much. 30 plus, probably.
He's been in wrestling since, what, 89, I think it was?
Yeah.
Long time.
It's a really, really big figure already. Now, another one is John Moxley, which I'm not surprised about as well.
I'm
since he's
very surprised about that. John Moxley is
Really?
infamously not interested in anything involving anyone at any time. He is infamously the least interested person in anything going on backstage. The idea that he is the one delivering the big speech, trying to get the crowd going again, of like the people backstage, the idea of him actually choosing to assume a leadership position, it flies in the face of everything I know about the man. That is the most surprising thing of all of this for me.
Think about it this way. This is why, for me, it wasn't that surprising, fairly speaking. Although, honestly speaking, I didn't know about the backstage thing that you're now talking about. But my perspective on it was relatively simple. Now, he was in one company that was crumbling apart at the time that he was in it, right? And he was involved in probably one of the most stupidest programs that we saw in a really long time. The one that they had with Nia Jax going on, I believe.
Yeah, there was a brief program there.
Yeah, and it's, if I recall correctly, it was one of the big reasons why Dean Ambrose at the time said, you know what, guys, sorry, but I'm literally out.
I have to disagree slightly on that one. Dean Ambrose had already decided to leave, and it had been announced by Wade Keller at the time. That was in the weeks after. The issue that sort of wrote him off, as it were, was that he was in a feud with Seth Rollins when he had the heel turn. He was wearing a gas mask. He had the sirens. He was having to say things about Roman Reigns. There was a lot happening. What you're referring to did start to happen just after he announced that he would not be signing.
Right, because he had that 1 month that he needed, or a few months that he needed to work through, and they decided to put him into that program.
Yeah, there was a program with Nia Jax. There was a brief program with EC3 where he asked where EC1 and 2 were. He just checked out completely by that point.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that. My memory is failing me a little. But regardless of that, so that thing happened, right? And he already went through this very embarrassing, very bad moment that didn't have him to be responsible of the entire things, but really questionable material that was he given to work with. Now he goes into the AEW, he gets the second wind, he gets the second chance, he works it through, and then there's another person who's chasing him from the company that he used to work in, and the same thing happens. The quality may drop, the ratings may drop, the people might be just going out because the WWE are going back on the track again, and people in the AEW have been growing very nervous about the entire situation. You can potentially lose another company that you work in, that you like to work in, because, again, of someone pushing things off the ledge. So with that being said, it feels like he is one of these men who can endure an amazing amount of stress, and then he just looks at it all and goes, okay, go to hell with it, and then helps everyone out. I wouldn't be surprised to see it, especially with the fact that there was also Danielson involved in it as well.
Yes, a true locker room leader there in every possible sense of the word.
We basically have veterans just stepping up and going, listen, be strong, be careful, things are going to go well, maybe, hopefully, we'll see how it goes, but just try to deliver that show. So we have that sort of middle thing working there for the AEW. And now the ball has been tossed to Tony Khan to do the right thing. But what is the right thing, for example? I don't know. I have no idea.
I want you to hold on to that for a moment. I'm going to go through a few of the questions. We're going to catch up a little bit. We will come back to it. I want to say hi to Keith, to Monique, to Bailey, and to Wiggly straight away. Bailey has a question. I just want to briefly touch on this because it's something we spoke about off air just beforehand. Bailey says, personalities aside, how have recent ratings and buy rates confirmed or changed your prior analysis of AEW's financial direction? I think this is a great question. I just want to briefly touch on, for example, Tony Khan speaking about 100 million in revenue. Now, we broke down the AEW financial situation. We broke down how much we can confirm officially that they made in the TV deal and the cost of certain wrestlers. For example, 6 million a year for Jon Moxley, 3 million a year for Cody Rhodes, Chris Jericho, CM Punk, and so on and so forth. Given everything that's happening now with ratings lower, buy rates lower, we did say at the end of that AEW were in a very difficult situation and needed to make changes in order to make enough money to keep going. Is that still your opinion?
I think a lot of things now really rest on the shoulder of how this thing is going to play out.
Yeah.
If they play it well, if the cards are going to be played well, can you imagine how much people are going to respect everyone involved in this and will be tuning back, especially if they play it out well and then somehow implement it into the story? Ooh. Especially given the fact that everybody talks it's a work.
Very true. That is pretty much what's happened with MJF after all. It's a shame that we've come back and had to do this all again and that MJF has suffered for it, what should have been his big moment, but we did eventually come back to it. We did. Spider Boss has asked a question for Gleb, that being yourself. Do you think the controversy has benefited AEW in ratings and financial? I personally think it's too soon to say. What would you say to that?
I absolutely agree. It's too soon to say.
Too soon to say. So, we will continue to take questions sporadically as they come in, and of course, as we find gaps in what we're talking about. But I would just like to divert slightly now. We'll come back to Tony Khan, but I want to make sure we don't miss out on discussing the Elite.
Oh.
Now, the Elite, of course, in this case, Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks are founders of AEW. The last time we spoke about this, we were talking about Cody Rhodes, a founder of AEW, leaving the company. So there's a whole lot going on right now with the AEW originals. But that's not all, because there's also a lot of people who've come into the company not having their contracts renewed. So we have AEW that took in all of this talent. We have Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, not just founders, but also EVPs in the same way that Cody Rhodes was. They have been heavily involved in the booking and development of the entire roster. Meanwhile, one of the major issues that CM Punk has is that he is accusing them of leaking information to wrestling journalists, such as, for example, Dave Meltzer. And Dave Meltzer was called out in particular right there in that press conference by CM Punk. I have to ask the question, with Cody Rhodes already gone, with Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks potentially on their way out or at least suspended, if AEW can't keep the originals, what chance do they have of actually keeping this thing afloat?
Fairly speaking, this is probably that story is worthy of The Sopranos, because let's try to dissect it a little. Let's establish our characters,
okay,
and see what actually we can work with. So first things first, we have Tony Khan. Now, who is Tony Khan? And what is the idea? So he is the son of a very rich businessman coming from a Middle Eastern company. I do not remember which one.
I just want to be very clear as well. When you say very rich, we mean very rich.
Like a few times richer than Vince McMahon type of rich.
Very
which is
rich.
It's a lot of money. It's really a lot of money.
It is unfathomable riches.
So that is the first thing, right? Second thing being, he decides that I want a wrestling company. I want to work with something regarding to that, and I want somehow to make fun shows. Everyone goes, okay, fine, and I'm sorry for these really strange sounds, but apparently my dog is trying to, I don't know, choke himself on something. But yeah, that happens sometimes. But what I was saying, yeah. So he wants that wrestling company. He wants to try to do something cool with it and cool about it, and opens AEW with the help of Young Bucks, who were previously...
Just while we've got you for a moment there, Gleb, a few people are saying your audio is cutting in and out a little bit. This may be software overload. If it's a new thing for you, it's probably on my end, but I just wanted to make you aware of it.
Might not be, and frankly speaking, I have a feeling that my mic is not feeling particularly well. Let me... No. Okay. Let's try it this way.
Okay.
Maybe it will help it out. I don't know, but I will try that out. So, we have, with the help of the Elite, right, with Young Bucks, who have been extremely popular at the time, thanks to the fact that I don't want to say they have invented the Spot Fest, but they made it popular.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, they popularized this very flashy style of wrestling.
Yeah.
Now there's Kenny Omega, who was one of the first people to receive 6 stars.
The first person. It was, of course, himself versus Kazuchika Okada at Wrestle Kingdom. I believe Wrestle Kingdom 9.
Yes, something along these lines. And then again, they repeated that with 575, right, or something like that. So he kept establishing himself as somewhat of the best wrestler in the world, according to Dave Meltzer.
Yes.
Right? To be clear on that, because your taste doesn't have to necessarily align with the taste of Meltzer. And then you have Cody Rhodes, who is a man who is coming from an amazing heritage of wrestling family, has been doing a lot of work, including his brother, including his father. Honestly speaking, the program that they had, the Rhodes family versus the Shield versus the Authority, is one of my most favorite storylines I've seen there. And now all of these people are coming together to make a wrestling company that they state are going to be fun, opens, and differently booked than the competitors.
Yes.
I think that we've already talked about it with you some time ago, maybe even back in the day, that it already felt a bit, okay, I mean, it's sketchy, but okay, why not try it, right? And now Cody Rhodes decides, okay, now I'm going to leave. And we still, as much as I understand it, we still don't know if that was internal problems with Tony Khan and with the Elite, or if it was his plan all along. Just literally build his name up as he wanted in the indies, making AEW his own indie, then come back and do the WrestleMania show and do probably one of the biggest matches that we've seen, with him having the entire body covered in blood internally.
We are still waiting for any conclusive information as to why Cody Rhodes wanted to leave. There were rumours of issues with the other EVPs, that coming from Wade Keller of PW Torch, but nothing beyond that at this point in time, and certainly nothing conclusive as to why he chose to leave.
So, to try and understand what is going on inside in the higher circle, I feel like it's almost impossible, even, honestly speaking. Because wrestlers are coming there for very good paychecks and for the fact that they're not going to get the scrutiny that they're going to get in the WWE back in the day. Now, it's not exactly the case anymore, because you have Triple H and Stephanie McMahon being one of the most important people together with Nick Khan, not Tony Khan, Nick Khan. So it's already looking a little bit different. Now, it is up to AEW to make sure that they have something else to offer and go, guys, I know that WWE offers probably a bigger paycheck, probably a bit different schedule, maybe even better revenues in somewhat of a way, right? And better ratings and something. But we have this. They need another ace in the hole right now with Vince out.
I'm catching up with the chat a little bit. Spider-Boss says the Elite recently posted on Twitter they'll be in a hiatus, being the Elite is officially an AEW property at the moment, so while suspended, they cannot work on that. Ed says Nick is still at Wrestling Inc. it seems. Thank you very much for that confirmation, Ed. Robs has asked, do you believe this has given Mox more bargaining power, with Tony being more inclined to pay out at least one more big contract? I absolutely do, particularly if there is a chance of losing CM Punk, losing Kenny Omega. You need to try and keep the big stars. John Moxley certainly fits that. And Will has asked, with how Tony may treat Punk, will that have an effect on the Elite and their relationship with the promotion? Now, I want to explore this in a bit more depth. So Tony Khan is not someone that we're aware of being a big disciplinarian. His record doesn't exactly speak for itself. And we've touched a little bit on some of the problems he's been having backstage, but let's jump more into that. A number of wrestlers have been open about negative experience with Tony Khan. Big Swole, for example, accused Khan of hosting a company with, and I quote, no representation truly, and when there is, it does not come across in a black community as genuine. There were also some issues Tony Khan has clearly had with Jonathan Gresham. There are reports he's been hard to work with, he's been unprofessional, and Gleb did touch earlier on about what was going on, and reports from Dave Meltzer that Khan is moody, that Khan is stressed, that Khan is doing things just for the sake of doing them. Tony Khan does not have a strong disciplinary record so far, and there is every possibility that siding with CM Punk will offend the Elite and drive them out. Siding with the Elite will offend CM Punk and drive them out. As an observer on the outside, how can Tony Khan actually right this ship?
I have no idea. I literally don't. But because, honestly, like, lots of things depend on the internal investigation, and more I think about it, more I understand that there's a high chance that there's no internal investigation. I literally begin to think, who was reporting in the internal investigation?
The internal investigation has been reported by a number of people. It came down via Dave Meltzer, Fightful, and of course myself.
And are we absolutely positive that it is going? Do we have an actual confirmation that it is
There's
going?
been no confirmation from AEW officially that the investigation is actively taking place.
I do honestly have a feeling that there's no investigation, that they're literally playing for time.
To be clear, and this is speculation on my part, the fact that there has been no announcement of any sort of suspension, pending investigation, no announcement of a firing, no announcement of this supposed injury, it sure looks like the Elite have been punished and CM Punk has been ignored.
Or at the very least, they are just trying to win themselves a little bit of time to understand how to swim out of the swamp that they got themselves into. It really feels like it, right? Because for Han right now, he needs to find the middle ground. Letting go of CM Punk probably is not going to be the best of the ideas, because you are going to angry the entirety of wrestling community, of those that love CM Punk and love watching him work. And you can't really blame those people, because he is really good. Whenever he picks up a mic, you know that you're in for a very good ride.
Very true.
I don't really think there's a lot of people who are better on the mic than he is at this given moment.
Very true. If he ever did come back to the WWE and I don't see it, I dream of CM Punk in a ring with a microphone and Kevin Owens. I dream of that, personally.
Absolutely agreed.
It's a nearly impossible position for Tony Khan, and there's more than one reason for that. Firstly, as we said, not the biggest disciplinarian. He has already, in the view of many fans and pundits, failed the test when Matt Hardy picked up an injury, failed to sort of lead the media in that regard. But also, Hector's asking a question that ties in very nicely with what I wanted to say next. Hector says, my view is, if I was in my boss's office and openly talked down and berated other executives of the company, I would be fired on the spot. It just doesn't make sense why he sat back and allowed Punk to say everything and not say a word. Now, this is something I also have written something about, because there is a really, really simple question here. Why didn't Tony Khan do anything to stop CM Punk? Now, there's lots of possible answers. Firstly, we know CM Punk is a flight risk. He may have frozen in the moment. But also, it wasn't that long ago that CM Punk sat silently while Tony Khan was the one going on a bit of a rant, this time against the treatment of him by the WWE. Would it not be hypocritical for him to attempt to discipline CM Punk for this same thing?
Well, theoretically, not really, since he is the boss and should be the person who is gonna. Because it really depends on how you do it, right? You don't necessarily have to just cut into the person's talking and just go, yeah, I think we're gonna move to the next question now. Thank you very much. So then, and just do it like that. You don't have to do that.
No.
What you can do is you can try to reason with the person a little bit, or try to insert a joke there, try to defuse the tension of the situation. Now, he did nothing of that, and one thing he throws, I wouldn't be actually too surprised if he just literally froze.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. The idea that it's always fight or flight isn't true. You also have freeze.
Yeah. So that one thing. Second thing is, we don't really know what is the exact relationship between him and the Elite after Rhodes' department. I wouldn't be particularly surprised if Khan actually doesn't really think that CM Punk is entirely incorrect.
That's certainly a possibility, not something I've really considered.
I mean, we all know that CM Punk is a person who loves to rant about things and make them feel much more catastrophic than they are maybe in reality. Yet, if we look back at the famous pipe bomb, if we look back at the famous thing that happened, was he actually wrong in the premise, in the entity of the problem? Not really. He maybe haven't picked the best form to deliver the message.
No, not his specialty.
No, but the message is somewhat truthful.
Boss Pedal has said this time will provide Tony with valuable data on the impact of Punk and the Elite on viewing figures. It might prove they aren't worth their high cost. I would hope that that's not a major part of his decision making, but it is a fair comment that it will provide extra data as regards that. There is still a little more to get through. And we're going to move on to sort of the WWE side now. We've spoken about Punk, we've spoken about the Elite, we've spoken about Tony Khan. But one of the main things we want to discuss here is that while all of this is happening for AEW, the extra pressure is coming from the fact that the WWE is doing the exact opposite. On the WWE side, the overall mood has been much more relaxed. Triple H is offering a fresh version of WWE that has resulted in higher ratings and greater responses from fans. We've seen a lot of returns and a back to basics approach of storytelling that's resonating well. It feels like NXT when it was black and gold. The use of Johnny Gargano notwithstanding, obviously he's been used in the exact same way. As regards the battle ongoing, PW Insider reports that the reason Worlds Collide and All Out was on the same day is that Triple H wants a bit of revenge. Worlds Collide was booked right before All Out in a very unusual position for WWE planning, and Tony Khan's on the record as not being happy with this. Historically, AEW has been the company throwing shots at WWE. While outside of a speech during the Hall of Fame ceremony by Triple H, there's been very little actual response by Triple H. That said, on this Monday's Raw, there certainly seemed to be some suggestions as regards media, as regards being careful what people say, that seem to allude to that. Since Cody Rhodes left AEW, shots against WWE have almost entirely vanished from the product, with the exception of Tony Khan. How do you feel about the sniping back and forth between WWE and AEW talent? Did it help or did it hurt?
Help or hurt whom? To be specific.
I'm interested to explore both then. Let's start with WWE. Help or hurt?
Probably neither, really. I think actually neither.
There's no sign of a real impact on WWE from it.
Exactly. Because the war against the Wednesday war that we had with NXT versus AEW was doomed for NXT from the very beginning, because it wasn't the idea of the entire company to have that fight. And frankly speaking, it is impossible to win against the names like Jericho, etc., when you don't have these names for your own, because we as fans of wrestling, we are going to appreciate what Triple H is doing because he's putting up hell of shows every single time, right? But for an outside viewer, you don't see Chris Jericho, you don't see John Cena, you don't see CM Punk, you turn off the TV because of it, right? Very strictly speaking. So it was already looking like they're probably not going to win that Wednesday war. Now, as soon as it ended, things started to go in a little bit of a different way, and a lot of it came down to the fact that it was very unfair competition between the two companies. Because the main person who was responsible for how things are going to go and for how things shall look like was Vince McMahon. As soon as Vince is out, things instantly look different. Now is when the real competition starts. Now is when we actually get to see WWE at its best against AEW at its supposedly the best. It's hard to say yet, right? So all those shots that came in from the AEW, in the end, WWE never even felt them, because right now they're actually in the race. Right now, go ahead, try to make that shot. It is going to backfire, most likely, especially now you have Cody Rhodes in there. And if, only if, I'm not sure if that's ever going to happen, but just imagine here for a second, he just approaches Paul Levesque and go, mate, remember I've been doing those comments about you on AEW shows. Do you want to reverse it? And just imagine that he goes out and hits a Rainmaker, for example, or something like that. Does somewhat of a shot towards AEW. That's going to create much bigger fuss.
Rainmaker, of course, the infamous move from Kazuchika Okada of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Just wanted to point that one out before we continue.
But it was a very big story point in that match between him and Kenny.
Yes,
he used it. If I recall correctly, he used it to beat him in the match.
He had to hit him with, I think, 5 Rainmakers to put him down. It was well played because the One-Winged Angel was always sort of, he was afraid of it.
Yeah. So just imagine that they're using the strongest story, one of the strongest stories that Kenny Omega ever told on TV, or not particularly American TV, but you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
So you use that story point in your own story in WWE as Cody Rhodes as a co-founder of AEW. That is sort of a fuss you can create that nothing AEW will do ever will do the same fuss.
I do feel that the big change wasn't necessarily Triple H taking over from Vince. I think it was Cody Rhodes stepping across the barrier. I really do. That for me is when things started to change. We're seeing now how much of a unifying force Cody actually was backstage, because there may have been rumours of issues, but we didn't actually see issues until now. I want to ask you one big question. One big question. You mentioned earlier that Tony Khan may have been buying a toy. If AEW, as is right now, is simply not in competition with WWE, the ratings aren't strong enough, the demos aren't strong enough, they simply cannot compete, does he get too bored to continue?
In terms of should he continue?
Do you think he would?
That he would continue.
Do you think he would continue, or would he get too bored to do so? Do you think he needs that competition to be interested?
I think so. I do think so, honestly, because, well, speaking in relative terms, when we say it's a big boy, it's a big toy, right? The toys grow up together with us, fairly speaking, right? So in the beginning, we play with very small Ferraris and we imagine how we're sitting in front of the wheel of one. And when we hit 50 and we have a few $1 million that we can spare, we just go ahead, buy that Ferrari and go it on a track with it.
Yeah.
Purely understanding.
We all end up with that few $1 million. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
I don't know about you. I have a couple of $1 million in my drawer, you know? But like you do certainly understand that you can crash in that thing.
Mm-hmm.
You do certainly understand that the car can fail and you can die again as well, right? There's lots of things that can happen. It can go wrong. It can go not exactly wrong. It depends. But it's a bigger toy. Now, AEW is that same bigger toy because now it is your business that you're supposed to make work somehow. It's your little challenge. You're not really going to lose anything. Well, not a lot of it at the very least. Well, Father is probably going to be quite mad and probably you're not going to be allowed to do a lot of business anymore. But it's still not that big of a thing to lose, apparently. Right? So for him, it feels like he's treating it like this very important challenge, right? It's an important way of self-proclamation that I can do it, and I can do it better than all of you with not hundreds, but with decades of years of heritage and experience. I can be better than all of you. You know, it feels like he's trying to make that self-statement. really work for the time being, but you know.
True, given time, that may change. Underground Temple has said something I just want to respond to. It says, can we stop comparing both WWE versus AEW and just enjoy pro wrestling? Underground Temple, what we are doing right now is analysing a business model. When you analyse a business model, you need to make comparisons to other businesses working in the same field in order to compare the ways that they are performing. We have previously spoken on the financial analysis of AEW. We're not talking about the wrestling in any way, shape or form here. We are not sitting and saying do or don't enjoy pro wrestling. There is no actual discussion of that ongoing. This is purely business. That's what we're discussing at this point, because it is important, I feel, to look at the long-term viability of competition to a monopoly like the WWE. The WWE owns the field. AEW was set out with the exact ruling: we will challenge this monopoly. They have come closer than anyone since WCW had them beat and reeling more than 2 decades ago. We need to be analysing these things. We need to be looking at where these stand in the landscape. This is not about pro wrestling. This is about business. Hector says, here's an interesting scenario and one worth discussing. What if Tony Khan suspended the Elite as EVPs and not as performers, meaning that the wrestlers would be permitted to continue, but they would no longer be executive vice presidents? Now, I feel what will happen immediately there is that they will leave the company. That is my personal take on it. But I do want to ask, how big a risk was it coming into a company with performers as bookers, with performers as backstage executives? Can you actually have performers as bookers and backstage executives in this manner? Trying to get you with the good ones.
Riddle me this, riddle me that. Actually, I think that no, you shouldn't allow them to be completely the bookers. I think that the best you should try to aim for, especially when people do have a lot of experience or have a lot of creativity, it's something that actually Triple H said some time ago, I believe, about Bray Wyatt, that he is absolutely magnificent in terms of his skills of how he thinks and his creativity, but there has to be someone who's going to control that tornado of creativity, right? And I think that it's sort of the same thing, because performer and a booker, these are very two different people. Performer looks at, and I say that actually from somewhat of a personal experience, because for 20 years of my life I've been playing classical music on the big stage, and then now I am working as a professional shoutcaster. So it gives me idea to take a look at how would you approach it from TV product, and how do you approach it from not exactly TV product, but from the eyes of the players that are doing it. Now, what they see, for example, if we make a comparison here, a player gives his all into this competition. He sees his mistakes. He sees some things. He understands if some plays are better or worse, or more flashy, less flashy, or things like that. But by the end of the day, what they care about is the result of that game, or the result of this concrete play, or how they perform themselves. Me, as a shoutcaster, as a fan, and as a person who works behind those cameras of TV, I do not care really about that way too much. Well, I do care, of course, but when it comes to a work perspective, I don't care. I need viewers to be engaged. I need viewers to feel interested. Some flashy things now and there. I can enjoy it together with people and then shout it away. So performer is going to go with technical point of view, while the booker is going to go, yeah, maybe this is very good, but we need to compel that story over here, and it works better than the story we're telling. Right? So maybe the best thing is work out this middle ground with Edge, because I think he has quite a bit of creative control over his character. Not everything, but a bit of it he does, right?
Right, so Edge in WWE, a similar setting to that.
Yes. I think that he doesn't have exactly the full control, but he is capable of influencing his character, right?
Yes, this is also true of a number of other people, Roman Reigns, Randy Orton, who are big enough that they can make suggestions and steer their own character, but aren't necessarily, they don't have the final say.
Yeah. I think this is the best. I genuinely think this is the best because it allows you to explore the middle ground between the managing stuff, really, or people who are responsible for the content to be good, and the wrestler who can also put his input and go, guys, I know this is going to work because I can make it look this way together with that particular person because I know his style, I know he works, yada yada. And now multiple equation starts to work. But just, go to Brock Lesnar, throw a piece of paper to him and go, write me a show.
It would be an interesting show, I'll say that. I definitely want to watch it.
Yeah,
but I don't think he'd come back the next week, I'll say that.
Yes.
Before we move on then, just as regards this AEW situation, Tony Khan, CM Punk the Elite, do you have any final thoughts that we haven't already discussed that you'd like to add in now?
Let's sit tight and watch what's going to happen.
One thing I can say, and I agree with you here, is that this is all very entertaining. This is all very entertaining. Even if you've got like the Call of the Void, little dark element, I just like seeing carnage, it's great. It has caused people to tune in. Tony Khan has spent a lot of time and effort trying to find extra reasons for people to tune in. It's worked. Typically the ratings boost whenever he's teasing a surprise. Right now, everyone's just watching to see what's going to happen next. That's happening on both sides because we still don't really know Triple H as a main roster booker. We still don't really know. So wrestling right now on both sides has got this almost car crash TV feel that we saw in the Attitude Era, where something's going to happen. Keep watching. Don't take your eyes off it. Something is about to happen.
Blink and you miss it. Yeah.
Blink and you miss it. Gleb, you did just mention your current professions, multiple of them. I do want to ask you a question, simple question right now. We already know that you're pretty well versed in professional wrestling. We've already watched this here show. Why should people follow you on Twitter? Why should people follow you on Twitch? Why should people follow your work, Gleb?
Because if you do like watching professional wrestling, then maybe you'll enjoy esports as well. Because we are known for lots of people that are trying to punch each other in the face via graphical avatars. And some people are successful and some people are less successful. And if you also like listening to the people that lose their mind because of it, screaming to the mics in a very same way as you go, Stone Cold, that type of thing, then if you do enjoy it, then go ahead, drop a follow, and we'll see you this January coming back with the next season of the Polish Academy League of Legends, of course.
I like that you nearly forgot the name of the game that you actually cover.
It doesn't matter. What matters is that people are trying to beat each other up. That's the only thing that matters.
To be fair, I've never played the game. I've only ever watched it when you're covering it, and it is strangely compelling watching. It's just war. But if you have enjoyed content like this, a more relaxed podcast style where we're covering certain topics, if you'd like to have Gleb back, we certainly got a few people clamouring for a return from Gleb after the last AEW financial analysis. So if you'd like more, by all means let us know in the comments, in the chat, on Twitter, and the like. In the meantime, though, on behalf of both of us, I just want to say thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all for Spoiler Warning on Friday. Thank you very much.